Welcome to another episode of Gin Clear Aviation. My name is Dan. I'd like to introduce you to Simon Tilling, who owns this lovely Navion aircraft. Welcome, Simon. Can you tell us a few amazing things about this Navion aircraft?
Be my pleasure. So it's a North American Navion, built in 1946 at the North American factory in Los Angeles, California. It was the first private aircraft that North American built following the end of the Second World War. The idea that North American had was that all of the pilots that were flying Mustangs and Mitchells and other North American aircraft during the war would want to keep flying when they came home. And why wouldn't they want to fly in a North American aircraft if the aircraft they were using kept them safe throughout the war? It was a great idea, but it didn't work because most of the pilots that came back from the war didn't want to go near an aeroplane again, because for them the connotation of flying was much different than it is for people like you and me who do it for fun. So it's a great aeroplane. It's built to military spec. It's really solid. We look around it later and you can just see all of the strength, the way it's built. It didn't work as a commercial enterprise. They had a number of airframes spare, so they did a deal with the US military and the Army Air Corps, and the USAF bought them to use for close observation support, for ferrying generals around. In fact, they landed one of these on an aircraft carrier when they were during the Korean War. And this one is painted to represent an L-17, which is the military version of a Navion that was used during the Korean War.
Fantastic, fantastic. So can you tell us a bit about the spec of the plane, sort of the engine size,
Sure.
propeller and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's got a 205 horsepower 6-cylinder Continental engine. It's driving a variable pitch propeller. It's got retractable gear. Cruises at about 150, 160 miles an hour. It's got a really good rate of climb. It'll climb at 1,000 feet a minute all day. And one of the most impressive things about this aircraft is its short field performance. It'll take off and land in about 200, 250 meters from grass. So it doesn't need a hard runway, hence why they could manage to land it on an aircraft carrier.
Thanks, Simon. Could you, let's do a walk around the plane and you can explain maybe a pre-flight check and all the sort of quirks of the aircraft.
Sure, okay. So starting on the port wing, get the mud off. First thing to note really is how ruggedly built the airplane is. It was built on the same line, as I said, as the Mustangs at the end of the war, and I think they must have had some of the aluminium left because it is really solid. So first thing to check, look at the undercarriage, make sure all looks okay, no leaks, nothing weeping. Check that the tyres haven't spun round on the rims. That's indicated by the little red marks there. Check underneath, make sure there's no dents, no holes, nothing visible, and then gradually we're just going to work all the way around the airframe. Lights are okay. Check that the balance weight is okay on the aileron. That's there just to take the weight out of the aileron so it's much more balanced and easier to move on the controls. Make sure everything moves and there's no play in any of the joints. Down to the flaps, same thing, just make sure that they're tight. We'll check the operation of those when we do our pre-flight checks in the aircraft. Moving around, just making sure everything's tight, nothing loose. Interesting point to note here is this cover covers 3 flare tubes. Now, when these airplanes were first built, there weren't a lot of lit runways or airfields in the US. So the idea was that when you got to where you were going at night, you released the flares from these tubes. They would go out over the airfield and then you would be able to see where you were landing. No flares in there anymore. I'm not allowed to carry them, but it's an interesting and quirky little feature. So making sure, once again, everything's tight, all the screws are in. Another interesting quirk of this Navion is this, because this is an early one, when they were first designed and then test flown, they found out that there was a problem with the incidence angle on the empennage, on the elevators. So you can see here, this line of rivets here is the original line where the elevators fitted. They had to move them up to change the angle of incidence, and that's what this fillet is along here, is covering the hole that was left. And then this little patch here, which is called a Texas patch because it looks like Texas, is all part of that mod that they had to make. If you look here, here's the original plate. You can see it was made in Los Angeles, and it was done on the 26th of the 11th, 1946. So this aeroplane was restored 12 years ago by a chap called Gordon Spooner, and he did a superb job. It was a complete ground up nuts and bolt restoration, so it's effectively a 76-year-old new aeroplane. So we checked the elevators, make sure that, once again, free movement and that there's no play in either the elevator or the trim tab. Same with the rudder, just make sure that all the controls that you can see are okay, the lock wire is still there. Same for starboard elevator, all full and free movement, nothing loose. Then coming down the starboard side, just check that the beacon's okay, and then onto the starboard wing. Repeat the procedure. Flaps are okay. On the aileron, all okay, no play in any of the joints. Horn balance is okay. Lights are fine. Down the starboard wing. Check the starboard main gear. Same thing, make sure there's no leaks from any of the hydraulics or the brakes. Tyre hasn't spun on the rim. Everything's looking okay there. These are Venturis to drive the vacuum instruments. So rather than have a vacuum pump driven off the engine, this relies on Venturi effect to create a vacuum that drives the instruments. Two of them as one's a backup. Then onto the engine bay. Just checking that there are no leaks, nothing appears loose, all the plug leads are okay. Everything looks as it should look and is relatively clean. So onto the prop. This is a variable pitch prop, so we just make sure that there's no play in the blades themselves, and that there's no nicks. They're all straight. No play in the spinner. Checking the main gear, once again, just making sure everything looks okay. Nothing loose, no bolts missing, anything like that. And then onto the port side of the engine. So just check the oil. Make sure that it's all nice and clean and the right level, which is good. So another interesting feature of these early Navions is the fact that it's an updraft engine, in that the cooling air comes in through the bottom, and then it goes up through the cylinders, the fin cylinders, around the top of the engine, and then the hot air exits at the rear. Interestingly, that means that there's an awful lot of hot air around all these accessories on the back of the engine, so they all have to be protected from the heat. In later versions, they changed this so the cooling air came in at the top, went through the engine and went out the bottom, and that made it a lot cooler at the rear of the engine. But this is an early one, and this is what they look like. So that's it, we're ready to go. First job is prime the engine, so open the primer, turn on the electric fuel pump, couple of seconds, and then sweat at 3 good pumps. Lock the primer, check the throttles at neutral. Clear! Good look around, can't see anybody. Mags on. Engine's running, oil pressure's coming up.
So Simon, what sort of equipment do we have in here? I can see that we've got some Garmin equipment and some old round dials.
So with the exception of the iPhone, the radio and the transponder, this is pretty much as it would have left the factory in 1946. Obviously it's all been restored, but this instrument panel layout, you can find this in the catalogue that they produced when they first made the aeroplane. So it's been restored back to its original specification. A lot of people who own these aircraft in the US have put glass panels in and all kinds of things like that, but I really like it like this. It's the way it left the factory. It suits me. We've got a Garmin 430 in there and a Mode S transponder, but that's the only modern equipment in here really. Oh, and the intercom. Everything else is 1946.
So you haven't got an autopilot or anything like that?
No.
All hand flown?
All hand flown, no autopilot. No, these are the only pieces of electronics in here. So if I go across, let's go across this way. So we've got the carb heat down here. We've then got mixture. We've got the pitch for the prop. We've got the throttle effectively. All of the gears is hydraulic, same as the flaps. So we've got hydraulic power. That's indicated by the light on there. Then we've got the elevator trim, flaps, landing gear. Then if you come down, we've got an emergency release for the landing gear, and we've got a pump here, hand pump in case we have a hydraulic failure.
All right, so that's not the flap lever then. That's a hydraulic thing.
No, flap levers here.
Okay, there's electric flaps, obviously.
They're hydraulic. They're all driven off the hydraulics. You can see the pressure there, running at 1100 psi of hydraulic pressure, so quite a lot of pressure.
So you need obviously to make sure you've got hydraulic pressure, otherwise a lot of systems are going to fail.
Well, the undercarriage and the flaps, but the good thing is the undercarriage will come down under gravity.
Okay.
And if it doesn't lock, you can pump it that way as well. So really, you absolutely need hydraulics for the flaps and to raise the undercarriage. If I go through, we've got battery condition, so charging or discharging. We're not using a lot of electricity at the moment, so we've got a little bit of charging there. If I go across, we've got airspeed, an old direction indicator, turn and bank, vertical speed, fuel pressure, tank, which we've just filled up, so that's full, oil pressure, oil temperature, manifold pressure, RPM, artificial horizon, altitude, hydraulic pressure and suction. Obviously because the suction's driven off the Venturis and we're not moving, that's at 0 at the moment, but that will come as we get the airspeed comes up. Right, so we'll just turn it into wind and do some power checks. Handbrakers on. So the first thing we're going to check is the magneto, so we bring the RPM up to about 1700, we can see there, and we switch each of the magnetos off in turn, make sure that the other one is working, which they both are. We then cycle the prop, make sure that the pitch is changing, and you can see that by the RPM going down as the pitch increases. You can actually hear it as well, checking that it returns back and the oil pressure stays high. Then we put the carb heater on just to make sure that it doesn't cause any obstructions to the air intake, which is fine. We check the idle. It's okay, bring it back to about 1200 RPM. Right, now we exercise the flaps, make sure they're working, check that they're both working. All the way down. And all the way up. And we'll set them on the first stage. Takeoff as we're 2 up, full tanks. So they're set at takeoff now. Full and free movement on the... Set the iPhone, connected to the Sky Echo, we've got that working, we've got the right altitude on the altimeter, and we can check that against the GPS, so we've got 530 there and 550 there, so that's okay. Right, landing lights on, beacon on, hatches and harnesses are all okay.
Yep.
Right, so we're good to go. November 56 Charlie, ready for departure.
November 56 Charlie, after the landing, traffic nothing known to affect. Surface wind is currently 24010 knots.
What sort of speeds are we looking and set up power setting for takeoff?
Full power, fine pitch, and we should be rotating at about 60 miles an hour. All these, the instrument is in miles an hour rather than knots. Right, so the runway's clear, temps and pressures are all good, pitch is fine, lights are on, ready to go?
Okay.
Right, so ease the power on, make sure that we've got full power, temps and pressures are all good. Just coming up to 60 knots, raise the nose wheel, and then off she goes. Gear up. Right, gears all up, flaps coming up. Airspeed at 90 knots, 90 miles an hour. Flaps are up, right, we can switch the hydraulics off. Trim for climb. So she climbs at about 95 miles an hour. So you can see we're going up at a fair old speed, about 1,000 feet per minute.
So in a cruise climb, what sort of setting for RPM and manifold pressure you're looking for on a normal cruise climb?
Well, we're at 2,300 RPM and basically full throttles. So there you go. We're at 2,000 feet. So we'll level off here. Now we can cruise at pretty well this setting if we chose to, but we'd be rinsing through our fuel. So we'll just pull it back a bit. Pull the manifold pressure back to about 23. And then pull the RPM back to about 2,000 RPM, and that should give us a cruise of about 130, 150 miles an hour once we trim it all out.
That's a good cruise speed, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're 2,000 feet, we're 2,000 RPM and 23 inches, and we're cruising at 140 miles an hour. And that will give us a fuel burn of about 35 litres an hour. So she's a pretty stable aeroplane because the big dihedral on the wings. It tends to make it really stable, and she's quite heavy as well. So we can cruise along pretty well hands off. The good thing about this, or the interesting thing about this aircraft, is the ailerons and the rudder are linked by springs. So if you move the ailerons, it moves the rudder. So it helps to keep you coordinated the turn, and if you move the rudder, it moves the ailerons. You can do lazy 8s and chandelles and steep turns. So it's your normal aerobatic aircraft is rated to +6, -2, -4G. This one's +3.5, -2.
So it holds just over 39 US gallons. How many litres is that?
About 150.
And so if you were full on fuel and you did a nice cross country, how far could you go before fueling again?
500 miles.
Right, that's a nice distance.
Yeah.
It's a very comfortable plane. I mean, would be a great touring plane, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's you can see why they use them for towing generals around and things like that.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful part of the world, North Hampshire.
It is stunning, great British countryside, isn't it?
Even in this weather, it's pretty cool. So I can demonstrate the link between the rudder and the ailerons. If I push the rudder, it rolls. See? I'm straightening it up, and I'm only flying this on the rudder at the moment.
Negative, the QFE 9.
So normally a rudder would just yaw the aircraft, but this rolls it as well because of the link between the ailerons and the rudder.
So it just creates a really good coordinated turn then?
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you take your feet off the rudder and then do a turn, it stays relatively coordinated because of the link between the two.
That's very clever. There's so many innovations in these old planes that we've kind of lost. And I don't know why they don't bring them forward to the modern planes.
Yeah. And we'll just do a couple of steep turns and you can see. It has a reasonably quick roll rate. A gliding launching site there, so we'll just head north. So we can do wing overs and things like that, so if we pull up at the airspeed off and just roll it over, let it go down again, gradually ease back so that we don't put too much G into it. Watch the airspeed. So it's a real nice aeroplane to display.
I mean, that was really smooth.
Yeah.
It felt fantastic. Probably your fantastic flying, of course. But
No, it's the aeroplane. Okay, shall we head back?
yeah, that's fantastic. Wonderful.
Should we just go above the clouds for a bit? Sorry, Dan, it's such a nice day. It's not bad. You can tell we always get great performance on a cold day.
Incredible. It's over 1,000 feet per minute climb there. So this is where they filmed Downton Abbey then, huh?
That's it. Yeah, it's interesting because they filmed the outside sequences here and the inside, but the village sequences were filmed up in Yorkshire. All supposed to be the same place, but on radio, November 56 Charlie, inbound airfield information, please.
November 56 Charlie, runway news 26 for the right hand circuit, the QFE 986 hectopascals.
26 right hand, 986 hectopascals, November 56 Charlie. Yeah, it's November 56 Charlie. We're joining overhead, then we're going to descend dead side for 26 right hand.
November 56 Charlie, roger.
So the limiting speed for the undercarriage and the flaps is 100 miles an hour, so we're just going to make sure we're below that, and we're at 90, so that's fine. So I turn the hydraulic pressure on. Make sure I've got pressure, you can see it on the gauge. So we're just crosswind now, then we're going to turn onto downwind to fly parallel with the runway. And a good look out for other airplanes. So now we're downwind, we give them a call. November 56 Charlie, downwind 26 right hand.
November 56 Charlie.
And then we check the speed, we're well below 100 miles an hour. So we can put the wheels down. Got 3 greens, which tells me the wheels are all down and locked. The first stage of flapping. There. Watch the airspeed. Then begin curving descent down to runway 26. Right, brakes are off, undercarriage is down, 3 greens, mixture's rich, pitch is fine. Hatches and harnesses are all okay, yeah, temps and pressures are all good. But now we're just coming on to final. Landing lights are on. November 56 Charlie, final 26.
November 56 Charlie, the surface wind is currently 27007 knots.
So we'll pull the speed back a bit, get it down to 80. Next stage of flaps in. Has quite a high descent angle, this aeroplane, so that's why it gets such great short field performance. So temps and pressures are all looking good. Approach is stable.
I hope you enjoyed getting to know the Navion aeroplane. I must thank Simon for showing us around and taking us for a demonstration and experience flight. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and like, as this helps me to build the channel. Wishing you clear skies ahead, this is Dan from Gin Clear Aviation.